So welcome. I'm Penny, along with my husband Scott at the back there. We own Analog Books. We are excited to have you all here tonight. We opened just over 3 years ago, so for some of you it might be your first time in, but most of you I've seen before, so we thank you for your support, your ongoing support. This night was originally scheduled a month ago when it was minus 40, so I think we made the right choice to change it because none of you probably wanted to come out then, including us. So you know that you're all here tonight for Vickie MacArthur. This is her book that she wrote, and this is her book that she wrote in, so she's going to talk about that tonight. And you probably all know Kat, and she will be talking too.
Oh, thank you. And it's just so great to be back up here at Analog Books. It was less than a year ago in March that I was able to launch my very first book, Baby, Lotus on Fire. And you know, it's both a very vulnerable moment, but a very joyous moment. And so I'm really happy to be here with Kat this evening as well, as she shares her book, Baby. And so thank you all for coming out. It's always interesting to see how many people that we know in common that we didn't know we knew. So this is really nice to see friends for both of us coming out. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Vickie MacArthur, and I'm a yoga and meditation teacher, as well as a minister and spiritual companion. I love music. I'm also a main dog walker for Sophie, my grandpuppy. So like many of us, I have many roles to play. And I think I have finally claimed the role of being a writer and an author. And I'm just so thankful to Scott and Penny and Analog Books for hosting events like this and supporting local writers and local authors. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You definitely deserve to have the title.
Yeah, thank you. I just heard Hugo now in agreement there. So
Staging you there.
yeah, of course, that's fine. Upstaged by a cat. Yeah. So in A Lotus on Fire, in my foreword to it, I said that it takes a village to write and publish and promote a book. And so you are part of that village. And, you know, these books don't just appear out of nowhere. There's lots of work that goes into them. And so I want to give a hand to Kat for all the work that she has done to get her book out, and for the perseverance it takes. And so this is a very special night, I think, for you to be able to share to a supportive and loving audience of friends and family and community. So it's kudos to you. So this evening, Kat and I hope to not only read from our books, but to also create the kind of atmosphere of quiet reflection and inner work that both of our books point to. In her book, Wildflower Seeds, Kat shares how making time for just 20 minutes a day in a reflective practice helps not only in our own personal healing, but in creating a world that can be welcoming and home to all. So tonight I will be reading from a book called Tears Become Rain. And it's a collection of stories inspired by the Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh, who I have had the great joy to meet and spend time in retreat. He passed away now about 2 years ago. And so this book is a collection of stories with a common theme of healing through difficulties in our life. using the practices of mindfulness and presence that allows us to turn and face our suffering and our challenges directly. And in so doing, creating a lotus out of the mud. So my story is called Thai in Disguise, and Thai is the Vietnamese word for teacher, and that's what a lot of Thich Nhat Hanh's students call him, is Thai in Vietnamese. And so my story moves from the grief of losing my mother and later losing Thich Nhat Hanh to ultimately discovering a source of peaceful presence within myself at Thai's Plum Village Monastery in southern France. So to begin with, I'd like to invite you into a practice of mindful attention that allows us to release our day and perhaps tune in and listen in a more reflective way. When I launched A Lotus on Fire back in March, I began with the sound of a bell and the meditation that goes with it. And Penny said to me afterwards, she said, I would never have believed that we could have it this quiet in the bookstore. So we'll see if we can create one of those moments again and surprise Penny. So I have a few pictures that go here. And so this book is meant to be read slowly, maybe story by story. It's meant to be savored. So I invite you to imagine that you are coming on a retreat at Plum Village in southern France. And so feel yourself slowing down, taking gentle steps upon the earth, maybe breathing a bit more freely. Can you take a deep breath in? Just beginning to let go, relaxing into this moment. And let's listen to a sound of the bell. Thich Nhat Hanh says that listening to the bell is a practice of bringing us home to ourselves. So I invite you to take a deep breath in, another one, and as you exhale, feel that sense of just settling into your chair, arriving fully in this moment. And close your eyes for a moment and just relax and be. Feel the weight of your body settling into the chair. Feel the invitation to slow down and rest. Feel yourself arriving fully in this moment. And feel the rhythm of your own breath, inviting you to connect with the rhythm of our planet, the ocean, the trees, the stars, and receive each gift of breath as a gift of prana, of life. And as Thai would say, breathing in, I know that I'm alive. Breathing out, I smile. I have that sense of gratitude just for being here. And keep releasing the busyness of your thoughts. Feel your body softening, tension releasing. Breathing in peace. Breathing out worry or stress. And bring awareness to your ears for a moment. And if ears could relax, what would that feel like? And let there be a sense of receptive listening, opening to these words and stories as they mix and mingle with your own. Tie in disguise. From tears become rain. My heart felt tender and raw. I had spent the past 3 months sitting by my mother's bedside in palliative care, watching as the tumor that began in her right ovary slowly but relentlessly extinguished the spark of life in her clear blue eyes. My life had been a blur of both busyness and being, packing away a lifetime of memories in my mom's home as we moved her into palliative care. Endless doctor's appointments and tests, quiet moments of holding her hand and watching her breathe. And finally, planning her funeral and attending to the myriad details that accompany the grief of losing a loved one. My heart felt as fragile as my mother's fine crystal, which I had hurriedly boxed away in my garage. So when I attended my first retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh in Vancouver, Canada, I simply wanted a refuge, some quiet time to sit and unpack my feelings of sadness and grief. Towards the end of the retreat, I had the opportunity to sit quite close to this beloved Buddhist master. As I looked up, it felt like his eyes were drawing me in. His all-encompassing gaze seemed to hold the depths of my soul. Time seemed to stop. Everyone and everything else in the room dissolved. I felt a wordless transmission of love directly from his heart to mine. It was a sacred moment beyond the capacity of my rational mind to understand. With the simple power of his gaze, Thai had awakened my heart to a love that is beyond time and form. 6 years later, I traveled to France to attend a retreat at Plum Village, Thai's home and practice center. Since that first retreat in Vancouver, I had participated in many other retreats with Thai. I was accustomed to how his radiant smile could light up a whole room. I had felt the power of walking together with him and the global Sangha, imprinting peace with every step. I had sat quietly in meditation with him and his beloved community, as each mindful breath invited an experience of what Thai calls interbeing, connectedness with each other and with our precious planet. This time, as I walked on the familiar paths of Plum Village and sat quietly by the lotus pond, I felt a sense of coming home. My heart felt peaceful and at ease. Yet something was missing, Thai's physical presence. Our dear teacher had suffered a devastating stroke a few months after the 21-day retreat in 2014, when I had last been here. Although he had recovered somewhat, he was now staying at his monastery in Thailand, where the warmer climate supported his health and healing. The monks and nuns of Plum Village led this retreat that I was attending. Tai often reminds us to see him in all his different forms. Nonetheless, being at Plum Village without him for the first time, I felt a deep sadness in my heart that nothing could fill. Through the practice of mindfulness, I took time to breathe and to be with this feeling of sadness, to see what lay beneath the surface. I unearthed a longing to see his beautiful smile, to listen to his gentle words, and to look into his loving eyes just one more time. Yet I also recognized a deeper longing, not for Tai's physical form, but for the love and interbeing he points to. Tai tells us to invite him to walk with us, to breathe with us, and to sit with us during our practice. This has often been my way of staying in touch with him after leaving a retreat and returning home. I decided I would try it right here at Plum Village. I began to imagine I was looking through Tai's eyes and that he was looking through mine. As I walked around the lotus pond he loved so well, I took off my shoes and invited him to feel the muddy path with my bare feet. I stopped and sat on the wooden bench under the graceful willow tree and gazed across the now fallow pond at the large oriental bell tower that rose out of a terracotta-colored stone base. Although it was early afternoon, I could almost hear the echo of the Vietnamese nuns chanting the sutras at the beginning and end of each day. As I walked along, I realized how intimately Tai knows these paths and these trees. I imagined all the feet from around the world that have walked these sacred paths with him before scattering in all directions like autumn leaves. I imagined the trees recognized Tai, and he recognized them. I wondered if they recognized Tai in me. I heard the wind in their leaves, and it felt like they were clapping. So happy to see me, so happy to see our beloved teacher in me. As the retreat continued, the idea came to me that I could be Tai in disguise. I smiled at this thought. Perhaps he would smile too. Instead of leading up front, he could sit surrounded by the Sangha and just be one of us. Because really, he already is. At the day of mindfulness, the Tai and me carefully sat down in the third row towards the center of the meditation hall. He watched lovingly as his monastic sons and daughters walked slowly up to the front to chant the sutras. He listened with every cell of his body to both the bell and the harmonious sound of their voices. He smiled. This was a happy moment. Sister Chan Hoi Nim, the abbess of Plum Village's lower hamlet, gave the Dharma talk that morning. She looked radiant and confident as she sat in Tai's place. Knowing the resistance she felt towards the heavy responsibility of becoming abbess, he would have been proud of her. Now she seemed to have embraced this new position and to let go of all of her doubts. She gave a very deep Dharma talk on love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. The Tai in me felt so much Tai in her. I felt his joy for his continuation in her and in the Sangha. We all continue Tai in our own way, whether by walking peacefully, breathing mindfully, sharing kind words, or listening deeply to someone in pain. After the Dharma talk and a short tea break, we gathered by the large bell for walking meditation. This time, Tai could blend into the middle of the Sangha. and watch as his monastic sons and daughters continue to lead us beautifully into the future. The Thai in me watched as the line of practitioners wound its way through the forest, together becoming a river of peace. I wondered what people would think if they knew Thai in disguise was walking beside them, or behind them, or inside of them. Later, we enjoyed silent lunch in the meditation hall. The monks and men sat in long lines on one side, facing the nuns and women sitting on the other side. Traditionally, Thai would sit at the far corner in the front row with the elder monks. On this day, however, the Thai in me was sitting toward the middle of the women's section. From here, he could see the earnest faces of his monastic sons and the beautiful upright backs of his monastic daughters. It was a different view, a different perspective. My heart was full of love and gratitude for being able to see anew through his eyes. As I sat quietly, I realized that some of my sadness had dissolved. Thai was truly here in me and in the Sangha. I remembered something he had said in one of his last Dharma talks at the 21-day retreat in 2014, seeming to look directly at me. Are you caught in longing for something in the future? What are you longing for? You're already what you seek. The wave already knows she is water. I had been looking for Thai outside of myself, but he had been there inside of me all along. Reflecting back on that timeless moment, spent looking into his eyes just after my mother had died, it occurs to me that my mother too is inside of me. The love I always saw in her eyes comes from the same source of love I saw in Thai's eyes. Her gift of faith was rooted in the Christian tradition, yet it allows me to walk freely in a Buddhist monastery. My expanded faith, encompassing hers and my own, honors and embraces all religions and the love that holds us all. And perhaps Thai in disguise is another name for that timeless, formless love that lies in all of us. Our practice is to simply breathe and to connect to the love we already are. Thank you. Kat calls herself a wanderer of the cosmos and a wanderer of the psyche. Kat offers soul work and spiritual companionship as a contemplative educator, writer, and artist, helping others navigate the depth dimensions of life, both individually and in small groups. She is a lifelong student of the world's wisdom traditions with degrees in theology and education, and she brings more than 40 years of experience, including as a facilitator of story circles, retreat presenter, post-trauma counselor, and executive director at a sexual assault center. She has taught in professional development, at university, in high school, and as a private mentor. She has studied in person with Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Jungian psychoanalyst and author, in 18 intensive trainings over 12 years. Kat uses writing, poetry, and art for self-exploration, as well as a therapeutic tool. She has written poetry and kept journals since she was a teenager, and has always wanted to write a book. Life events had a habit of postponing those book plans until, during the pandemic, she kept hearing the words, "If not now, then when?" Anybody else hear those words? Yeah. For whatever we want to do. So she mined her experiences of working with people on a very deep level, as well as her 17 banker's boxes of journals. Where do you keep them all, Kat?
In that closet underneath the stairs.
Yes. And the result is her book, Wildflower Seeds, The Beauties of a Reflective Life. And so instead of writing 5 different books about nurturing the inner life, she has poured out what she knows into this beautiful 1 volume here. And I know Kat as part of our group of spiritual companions here in Lethbridge. And I've always been inspired how she can take a thought and she kind of can turn it every which way and look at it from many different angles, kind of like a kaleidoscope. And she always gives a different view or a new possibility. And so I think that's also what she's done in her book as well. And she has a curious and creative mind. And she, for those of you that also know her, she's a very creative artist, graphic artist, and she's brought, well, her own art from the cover of her book, but I've seen many other of her art pieces and her poetry and so much. She's just does so much. And in this book, she includes a plethora of practices to explore what she calls depth dimensions. I think that's a new word. Did you create that? I love the idea.
The phrase.
Yeah,
yes, I
depth dimensions, or the deeper calling of our soul. And so I know her book will speak to your soul as much as it has spoken to mine. So thank you, Kat.
It's very humbling hearing someone that I admire so much talk about me and introduce me. So thank you very much. I'm also really appreciative that so many people that I know came, and then not only that, but then people came and then they saw everybody else and it's like, oh, you're here too, because they came for Vickie. And so it's been really nice to know that our circles of friendships have a big overlapping part in that Venn diagram of life. I did want to bring my painting, which is the cover of the book, and there's a difference in the two, though. And I invite you, after we finish speaking, to come up and take a look, because in the painting, okay, there's a story that says that we are to be so still when we meditate that animals feel comfortable to come and sit and drink at the lake that we're sitting by. So this is my territory of where I live now. I've lived in 5 or 6 different cities. I'm not someone who travels very many places. I go somewhere and I sit and I live there for 3 to 5 years. So back when I started my second adult life, that is, I retired from working in violence against women issues, my spouse and I came out and to the Crow's Nest Pass, where his parents had an apartment in their house that they were willing to have us live in. I was almost 40, he was almost 50. I fell in love with the mountains, I fell in love with the sunshine, I fell in love with the dry air, and it was like, oh, thank you for bringing me here. And then, the rest of the story is surprise, surprise. I got pregnant for the first time, within about 6 months, and then my second adult life started. And although I've lived in a few cities since then, so now I've ended up a little bit closer to Chief Mountain, and I'm really glad to be here. So, Wildflower Seeds came about because I met so many people working in social services or in more explicit political movements, demonstrators. I was the age where it was ban the bomb and against nuclear weapons, things like that, and done my share of marches. But as I got to know people closer and better, I found out either that their passion was fueled by anger, which destroyed them as much as it hurt anybody else, or they were just so exhausted and pouring out themselves and trying to do service because it's a never-ending stream of trauma that this world is producing, in case you haven't noticed. And almost everyone I knew was either on antidepressants or thinking of going on them, or was taking a trial of getting off of them for a while but was nervous about it. And I thought, how do we sustain ourselves for the long haul, knowing that we could pour our lives out trying to get a law changed that's more amenable to what I would consider human rights, but then all we need is an election and everything shifts. We saw that in 2016 in the United States, and it might be coming back. About the same time that I had left my study of theology, and went in, people want to know, what do you do with a degree in theology? You go into social services. That's basically what you do. Well, the combination of seeing so much suffering in the world and becoming a little older and then seeing it in my actual work, it was very hard for me to deal with the whole question. Good God, take a look at the world. How does this fit? How does this work? And I made a deep study of it. And although there are, I won't give you a lecture on it, but there are 4 main reasons that people throughout the ages have come to say why there is evil in the world or suffering in the world, as well as there being a quote-unquote good God. Things like, well, we have free will, which to me is a little bit like the saying, let's go ahead and give a 6-year-old a machine gun and see what they do with it. They have free will, right? So anyways, these different answers to that question may have satisfied some people some of the time, but none of them have satisfied all people all of the time, and none of them had satisfied me. So right off the bat, people sometimes ask, is this a spiritual book? Well, I choked for many years, both on the word God, as well as spiritual. And because I wanted to say, well, it's spiritual, but it's not, it's not like, and there were all these ifs, ands, and buts around it. So I've actually developed a little bit of a different language for me, and I'll give you the code for it. So to me, what spirituality is all about is the depth dimension of life. We suffer from depth deprivation in our lives now when we're just like go, go, go all the time. And so the part of us that can consider and choose how we live, choose who we are in the world, is that depth part of us. And if you would have asked me 40 years ago who God is, or all kinds of questions of the deep and real things in life, I would have had answers. I don't have any more. But I'm really glad to be part of other people who have these kinds of questions too. And even though I don't know whether there's a God or not, I do know that there is love. And I do know that I want to live like that. I want to live out of that. And that's what this book invites us to do. To first of all, love ourselves, like we're a person too, just as much as I love any of the people that I would have worked with at the sexual assault center, I needed to learn to love myself as much as I loved them. As much as I loved my son growing up, which, you know, as any mother knows, you'd give your life for your child if you had to. I needed to love myself as well so that I could be a good mother as well. So these practices in here come in two directions. One is to help you access deeper wisdom within, to rest and renew yourself. And then the other types of practices in here will ask questions, basically of the, why are things the way they are? Why do I feel such and such? Why is it that people do such and such? And again, no clear answers or 1,000 answers, but that's it. So the original title of this book, before I had the idea for the metaphor of wildflower seeds, was having an inner life is a political act. Because in this world that wants to keep us distracted all of the time, to have an inner life takes a choice and a determination. And none of us are going to do it perfectly. But if we can keep going back to it, that's why I advocate the 20 minutes a day. So I'll read from my introduction. I am awakened by the sound of the gas-powered lawnmower again. It's 9:01 a.m. on Saturday morning, and next door, Mr. and Mrs. Lawn Care are doing what they do best, cutting and pruning and shaping and pulling and moving every living thing that they can control in their tiny, tidy yard next to my tiny, shabby yard. And I despair again of sleeping in. This is one of the strongest memories I have of living in that long ago home. Well, my neighbors were in reality truly lovely people, and eventually I gave in to the culture's demands for tidy lawns and hired them to cut my own grass and prune my own bushes. They were delighted, and I sighed and mourned a little. The sound of that lawnmower, of the lawnmower this morning as I'm writing this, of every lawnmower I hear has become to me the symbol of how we, and by we I mean our Western culture for sure, but possibly most humans of our time, have gotten it so wrong, bringing our planet and ourselves to the very edge of survival. In a desperate attempt to control all that is around us, we've disregarded the Earth's natural rhythms, rerouted and dammed up waterways, pulled down mountains mining for coal, and paved the meadows and the forests with concrete and grasses not native to the land they cover. And then as soon as the grass grows, we grab noisy engines to hurriedly mow it down. It's enough to make you wonder why the grass doesn't just give up and die when their every urge to grow is thwarted over and over again. I paint this metaphor of the lawnmower destroying that which is natural and growing in very broad strokes, and of course it's not true in every detail. Yet it is an image that has stayed with me throughout my adult life as I've witnessed the ongoing destruction of the Earth's health and the ongoing destruction of the mental, physical, and spiritual health of so many of us humans. We're living so quickly, going so fast that we barely have a clue as to where we're actually headed. So many of us live frantic lives filled with other people's voices, from the never-ending news cycle on our phones to our boss's demands or our family's latest crisis. We're quick to dash off a response to any query and know how to get dinner on the table in 20 minutes. And then after all the have-tos of the day, we're tired. Netflix beckons, but just let me throw a few things into the washing machine. Tomorrow it's the same, all over again. At the same time that we're worried about the state of the world and the state of our own communities, will there be another pandemic? What about climate change, wildfires, and the very weird weather? I didn't wear a coat tonight. Our hearts break to see those who are unhoused trying to cope with the cold, and young mothers struggling to pay for diapers at Walmart, not to mention the corruption and hypocrisy we see in too many political systems around us. But in response, what can we do to help? When do we figure out what we really think about things? When do we stop to breathe or wonder? When do we work through those difficult conversations that weren't quite finished? There are so many causes, so many needs. Where do we put our support and our energy? How do we know what is meaningful to do, or have time to prioritize those sorts of non-urgent, yet oh so important activities? Can we reflect upon life while we're living it? When we feel like we're in the ball in a pinball machine being batted from one obstacle to another? Most of us can't take days out of our lives to step away and ponder the deep and real questions of life, and most of us don't want to live in monasteries or ashrams away from the real world. Let me take that metaphor of the lawnmower and turn it over. Most of us have been to, or at least seen photos, of a meadow in springtime filled with wildflowers blooming. The colors are natural, not neon, predominantly light green with soft blues, pinks, and yellows. The bees are buzzing and busy. The edges are filled with blooming lilac bushes. Just thinking about that meadow or hillside or mountainside of wildflowers invokes a sigh of pleasure, release, relaxation. How can we feel that release and relaxation more often? How can we breathe easy and really think about how to live in cooperation with that kind of natural beauty? Can we plant more wildflower seeds? While those of us with land might be able to transform our green lawns into wildflower lots if the city bylaws let us, I'm concerned here with how we can live like wildflowers. I'm bringing to mind how we might live so that we're confident we belong where we are, that we're suited to where we are. How might we live where we fit into the ecosystem of the earth, where just as the wildflower roots hold the soil from being blown away, our own roots, that is, who we are deep down, are protecting the resources for our children's futures. How might we live where we can bring beauty into the world alongside others bringing beauty into the world? How might who we are be nurturing to ourselves and others? How might our own roots, leaves, and flowers provide food, medicine, and a home for those living around us? How can we live intentional lives that contribute to our own well-being and the thriving of the life around us? It's not easy to leave the rat race when it seems we must keep running just to survive. These problems of excessive speed, greed, over-control, and domination echo through all the systems of our lives and feel almost impossible to address. But I do think that each of us has some choice to do what we're able to do, here and now today in our own imperfect, full lives. By that I mean we are able to move to a more life-enhancing way to spend our lives, investing ourselves into creating a world where we all can live freely and with integrity. We may not be able to change laws or unilaterally reallocate corporate priorities, at least not today. Yet most of us can carve out 20 minutes today to rest, think about things, and listen for what we might do next. We can stop at a park for 20 minutes at lunch or on the way home from work, or take 20 minutes away from scrolling social media, or get up 20 minutes earlier or go to bed 20 minutes later. One 20-minute session here or there won't change your life, but the accumulation of these sessions daily, over time, will. They can create enough breathing room to take charge of our lives by renewing our strength, asking important questions, and imagining a world worth living in for all of us. We can discover what's most crucial and discern how to live this now. It's a false dichotomy to think that we must choose between either political action either political action for what we believe in, or being a calm and enlightened person. Each 20-minute session plants another wildflower seed into our lives and into the world. This book is intended to help you plant those seeds and to develop the habit of a daily 20-minute reflective practice, which I call depth dimension practice. It offers dozens and dozens of ideas of what to do during those 20 minutes in order to explore those important questions. The resources in this book go in two directions. The first is to come to consciousness and understanding about yourself in relationship with the world and your cultural voices. That is to say, to find clarity and discernment, unraveling internalized oppression. The second direction is to encourage you to come into silence, to rest, to restore and balance your mind, body, spirit, and to hear the inner nudges toward wise actions. The practices are divided into 5 modalities of word, image, dream and story, silence, and embodiment. That's where I came up with the 5 books. This book can deepen your confidence in your self-sovereignty. It can help you know where to invest your limited energy for yourself and for the common good. It's not one or the other, it's all of us. And it can bring a bit of joy and perspective to each day. Why do bad things happen to good people? I've worked to develop some wisdom about these things. Even though some of the best wisdom I can offer is a sincere, I don't know why bad things happen, but I do know that we can make things better if we respond with compassion, as well as to reach for whatever joy we can find in our everyday. This is quite a shift from 40 years ago when, deeply immersed in my theological studies, I certainly could give you answers. So even though I don't have many answers anymore, I love to explore questions. I know that reflecting on good questions, along with exploring many nonverbal ways of being human, can help us to make meaning in our daily lives, as well as discern the actions that will lessen suffering and bring more justice. This is the best definition of soul life that I have right now, the openness to and the reaching for more than the daily grind. It leads to a full and enriching life, a way of living more comfortably, creative, and joyfully with mystery. It's a life worth living and sharing with others in whatever ways we do that as humans. And that's why I invite you to make meaning and make soul through consistently practicing depth dimension activities. What we do can make a profound difference to ourselves and each other, for good or ill. What we do is influenced by what we think and feel, and though we do not have total control over what we think and feel, due to past traumas, current gut biomes, the people we have to live with or work for, etc., we definitely have some control over our thoughts, feelings, and actions. We have some choices about what we pay attention to in our environment, and the ability to contribute to environments that can enrich our lives. We're not completely at the mercy of our bosses, our political leaders, or social media. I think we have, therefore, some responsibility to not just do no harm, but to help where we can and within our reach. I've come to see that there are huge untapped resources of meaning, connection, inspiration, healing, and possibility within our lives, just as we have huge resources for destruction. I know that many of the practices I will talk about in this book tap into those resources for possibility and hope, that it is possible to live with purpose and to move into happiness. We live in a world that has more than enough for our needs, but not for the greed that is so present in all this interconnectedness. The abuse of whatever power we have is a constant temptation, as seen in the dominator mentality, the patriarchy, and the many isms that we are increasingly becoming aware of. There are many forces that feed on our unconsciousness and our depressions. These forces are rampant, almost universal, and there's a huge need to examine and develop our inner freedom in order to lead to outer freedoms and to nurture our own enoughness in order to create enough for others as well as ourselves. it's necessary to recognize, escape, and strategize to disempower both inner and outer predators, to sensitize ourselves to any abuse of power around us, including that which we ourselves perpetrate. Depth dimension practices help us to do this, and it's worth the time, energy, and commitment to do these activities for ourselves and all the others with whom our lives are so deeply embedded. Wherever we have choice, let us not unconsciously mow down those wildflowers. Thank you. I wanted to say where the phrase depth dimension comes from. I use that word for what some people call spiritual practices. I also use the words deep and real to talk about, well, the deep and real things inside of us. And as I said, I don't know what there is to say. Oh, there's a great book I read one time. It says, "What is there to say about God except God?" I mean, it's like, who knows? But there is a great mystery that somehow we're part of it. If you want to call that love, call it love. But I know that if I use words that people who find meaning in the religions that they were brought up in, that if I use that kind of language, there's a whole nother group of people with whom I've worked in my life who would be completely turned off. Anything that has to do with God, traditional religious understandings of things, or anything like that, it would be like nothing. And yet when I could talk to them about, what's deep and real in your life? What do you care about? What's worth living for? We had plenty to talk about. And so I wanted this book to be accessible to all of us who feel that way. Now, I'm going to close with another practice. Vickie started with one, and this is a sample of one of mine. What time is it, please? 7 o'clock? Okay. I'll do the shorter version. This practice is called Between Earth and the Heavens, Between an Atom and a Star. And this is one of the practices that I have in here that does both of those things that I said these practices are about. Like, one of them causes you to think about a whole lot of new things that maybe you haven't thought of before. And then also to relax and rest into our deeper wisdom within. This is a practice that once you kind of get the rhythm of what happens in it, you can do it anytime and anywhere, and nobody needs to know you're doing anything except thinking about the latest song that you love. So, I invite you to do this with me if you're comfortable with it. So sit comfortably and attend to your breathing. You don't have to change it, just notice it. Relax your muscles as much as you can. Take a couple of deep breaths and bring your attention to your feet. Imagine that you are growing roots down from your feet, deep into the earth. Imagine yourself well planted in fertile soil. Now bring the energy of the earth up through your legs. Move your attention up to your pelvis and imagine the earth energy moving up through there, filling up through your body. You're connected and you belong here. Bring it up from your pelvic area, bring the earth energy up to your solar plexus. Bring it up to your heart, the center of love, to your throat, the center of where we speak out who we are and communicate with others. Now bring it up to the third eye, which is an imaginary eye between the two eyes that we see out of every day. The lower with the third eye that is the eye with which we see under, beneath, around, and behind what's going on. Bring that earth energy up to the crown of your head then. It's a place just above where your hair stops. And as you're imagining that center, imagine a rose there unfolding. Many of you will recognize that these are the 7 chakras that we talk about, energy centers within and around our body. The flower that blooms at the top of our head crown chakra is traditionally a lotus. And remember that lotuses have a very long root system that goes into the mud and the muck at the bottom of a pond. And Thich Nhat Hanh had a wonderful saying, no mud, no lotus. So the mud in our life has a place as well. Here in the West, our symbolic sacred flower has been the rose. And roses thrive when they are given bone meal and blood in order to fertilize them with. So again, another thing of beauty that somehow takes what's muddy, mucky, spilled life force and creates something beautiful out of it. And that's who we want to be in the world. Now imagine that rose fully blossomed and fully opened to the energy of the heavens. Imagine bringing the earth's energy upward to mix with the light of the heavens that's coming down through the rose, and with your connection with all that surrounds you. Imagine the light of the heavens streaming down and mixing with all of that earth energy that you brought up through your body. Imagine it coming down from the heavens into your third eye area, down to your throat, mixing the earth and the heavenly energies together, down to your solar plexus, which is your area of I am who I am, my identity. I have a right to be here. I have a right to participate here. Take another deep breath. And as you're ready, join us back in the room here. In this room, in this analog bookstore here in Lethbridge on a Thursday night. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, for considering this kind of wisdom in the world. May it be so